interested in. I mean, is anyone interested in scaling and advanced analytics capability in an enterprise? Because typically I come to these events and, you know, these are the least interesting talks. Everyone's interested in, you know, the data science case or the design used or, you know, more the technical capabilities. And this is really about organization. I'm particularly interested in scale because I think scale means impact. And I think whatever role you have in your organization, I think everyone who's dealing with advanced analytics, they really wants to have impact for that to matter in someone's life. Now, this seems to be flipping in right through. So when Wholesale asked me to talk about scaling and advanced analytics capability in an enterprise, I first started to think about what scale meant. Now, typically when people talk about scale, they talk about making something bigger. But scale by definition is really a relative term. You cannot scale something without relating it to something else. So I started to think that, you know, scale is only relevant to the context you're in or the type of impact you want to have. And I'll give you a bit of example of what I mean. Take, for example, Google search. Now, you're solving a relatively small problem for a huge amount of people. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm really happy that we all have Google search, and I think they do an amazing engineering and data science job. But if it was gone tomorrow, I think I would live. Take another type of problem where you are solving a massive problem for one user by detecting, say, a very, very specific and rare kind of cancer early on. Now, both of these problems are really impactful if you solve them. Also, you can have a lot of impact if you solve both. But the capability you need to solve both problems is actually very different. In the case of Google search, you might have hundreds of sub-product teams with advanced analytics capabilities weaved into those teams across the whole organization. Whereas if you're trying to detect a very rare form of cancer, you might have only tens of really specialized data scientists who are focused on image analysis for the specific purpose. Now, I think the reality is that most of us are working somewhere in between these two types of problems. I know I am. And so I think when you talk about scaling and advanced analytics capability, it's really relevant as to what your context is in your own organization. So what is your digital maturity like? How big is your organization? What's your underlying business? What's the mindset, the culture, the strategic ambitions of the company? Because these become really important elements to take into consideration as you build up. Now, explaining a little bit about my context, I come from ING Wholesale Banking. That is the part of ING, the Dutch bank, which is dealing with corporate and institutional customers which have a turnover of above 250 million euros. So we are serving big companies and big financial institutions with banking services. We've got 11,000 employees over 40 different countries. And we made a profit before tax last year of 2.8 billion euros. So we're a sizable organization. The interesting thing about the organization, which I think is relevant here, is that within wholesale banking, you're basically dealing with experts. These are experts which have a high level of specialization, which are providing insights and advice to clients, and are doing quite specialist work, which is very difficult to completely take over today with AI. And so that means that the way we brought that into our advanced analytics capability approach is to basically look to augment those analysts on a day-to-day basis with insights which they could spontaneously use within their work. And that meant that instead of, for instance, putting in data science to a straight-through technology process, like putting a recommender on an Amazon website, we developed end-to-end software products with embedded machine learning that generated a number of insights which were of value to these specialists in their day-to-day work, and in turn to our clients. In the last 5 years, we've developed a capability of around 83 people in 4 different countries, with around 11 product squads, all developing these types of software products. We've developed a couple of products right through to production. We've developed tens of MVPs, that we've done hundreds of experiments. We've collected a huge amount of data in our data assets. We've built around that data a state-of-the-art data analytics platform, which we can make available to data scientists who are looking to do feature engineering and do data science the command line, and to analysts who just want to basically use this information as well for their day-to-day analytical work. Now, to give you an example of a product we have developed, Katana Lens. Katana Lens is a product which enables trade discovery for asset managers. So we have asset management clients who are looking after money for their clients, and they want to invest this money in securities in order to generate a return. One of the universes of securities they're investing in are bonds. A bond is like a loan, with the difference that a bond can be publicly traded, so you can transfer it publicly from buyer to seller, or from seller to buyer, between different traders. And these portfolio managers have a problem that they want to obviously maximize their return for a given amount of risk. And so what they're constantly trying to do is take their current portfolio, which exists of bonds that they have, that they own, and try and shift out of these bonds into other bonds which are of a similar risk profile but yield a higher return. Now, I'm sure you can imagine there are thousands and thousands of bonds out there. So to analyze this end-to-end matrix for relative value trades is quite a time-consuming job. Further complicated by the fact that your given situation and composition of your current book is relevant to the process. And so each portfolio manager was taking a lot of time to do this. And so what we've developed is a tool which enables asset managers to basically find relative value trades which are particularly interesting given the context of their current trade book. And we're busy trying to roll that out to different clients at the moment. The product was recognized by Global Finance as it won the Global Innovators Award for 2019, so we're pretty proud of what we've accomplished there. The interesting point here maybe to retain is that what you'll see is that often you get more traction building an internal product, and it's less risky building an internal product, but on the back of that knowledge, that technology and that data science, you can also externalize a product thereafter, because typically in a B2B context, the problem that your people have serving clients are very similar to the problems that your clients experience on the other side. And this is an example of a product where we started developing internally, and then managed to take that knowledge and the technology we built and then externalize it into a product which had value directly for our clients. Now over to you. You just said you want to have impact. You are probably, as I heard in earlier talks, advanced analytics managers, consultants, data scientists, data engineers, students. There's a combination here of people who want to have impact with advanced analytics, and in some way or form want to basically scale that advanced analytics capability relative to the organization that you're in. Now, you probably are at different stages in your the maturity of your journey, but let's assume you're starting at the beginning. Now, we've been doing this for around 5 years. We don't know everything. There's a couple of things we've learned. We by no means have by no means arrived. I think there's a lot more impact we can have, and a lot more we can do. But along that journey, we learned a couple of things. And so what I'd like to do is leave you with 13, say, lessons. Again, it's an arbitrary number. I hope your journey is more lucky. And hopefully you can do something with those lessons in your own context. So let's assume you've got an assignment to research what advanced analytics could mean for your organization. or you are just an enthusiast who wants to bring it into your organization, then the first thing you're going to need is to get leadership on board. Now, this really reduces friction. I mean, often, people who have the creativity and the entrepreneurship to start this off are typically the kinds of people who prefer to do it on their own, a little bit rebellious, they want to change the organization. But in a big organization, or to have real impact, it really helps to have someone on your side that already has a platform. So get leadership on board and use it. It reduces the amount of friction you'll experience in getting your ideas across. In our case, that's Ralph Hammers. He's our CEO. He started off 5 years ago, standing on every single stage in the world, talking about how ING is turning from a bank into a tech company that happens to have a banking license, and that's given us a lot of momentum. The organization is listening. And once you've got leadership on board, you can link to strategy. And when you link to strategy, suddenly people become available, money becomes available, processes which help you start to emerge in your organization. In our case, our strategy is to empower people to stay a step ahead in life and in business by creating a differentiating customer experience. Now, I'm sure you'll all agree, you cannot create a differentiating customer experience today without advanced analytics. Customer expectations are just too high. They're used to beautiful technology products that are intuitive. And that intuition is based on advanced analytics in a variety of different forms. So this creates a tremendous pool within our organization, and hopefully within yours, to develop an advanced analytics capability that can serve this need. So link it to strategy. And if you can't, find a way. The next thing you're going to have to do is bring together a core team. You can't do it alone. You also can't borrow these people from different parts of the organization who already have a day job, because you're going to need a tremendous amount of focus to get this done. So you want to bring together a core team, which initially comprises what I call a CEO. That's typically a general manager that has credibility with executive people, that knows how to talk general management talk. They can organize budgets. They can have people buy into the story. You need a CTO, who's basically got a direct line into the IT organization, who can bring anything you need from IT without getting stuck in backlogs and general, current priorities. Who can bring the infrastructure, servers, who can bring installations of the different clusters that you need, who can bring the tooling. And someone who has got basically the drive not to get pulled into what the general enterprise tools that we're using are, who really has, a bit of a forward-looking approach, dares to take a step into new technologies and set up experimental type stacks that the team can potentially use. You need a chief analytics officer, someone who can actually do data science at a high level, but can also later draw in other people to work around them from the community. You need a chief commercial officer. That typically was my role. Chief commercial officer, what I call, is a combination between an evangelist, analytical translator, someone who understands the domain, who understands what the value is, who can speak the language of the domain, who can articulate business cases, who has the stamina to initiate cases. Bearing in mind, I think it will be similar in some organizations to what it was like 5 years ago with us, is that when you start talking about big data, or about, well, then it was big data, now about advanced analytics or AI, some people in the business do not have a clue about what you're on about. This is completely mystical to them. They find it very difficult to wrap their heads around. You need to punch through that with an understanding of their context. So domain expertise and the analytical translation role that is being spoken of is quite important here. And then you need someone who's going to be your data steward. You need someone who's going to get you data to start, who's going to beg, borrow, or steal that data in some way from your organization so that you can actually get going. Now, that's the one role which can come from outside the team. It's a very operational role. It's a person who has contacts all over the organization and is happy to go and sit next to people and literally wait while they transfer the data for you, who squishes you into very full backlogs, and who really just starts to get you data which you can use. And then it becomes time for some kind of flow of realistic advanced analytics ideas. Now, the way we did that is we basically talked a lot. We had one-on-one meetings. We presented to different teams. We presented in big town halls. We created a workshop framework where we explained to people why we're even talking about this, what the possibilities are, what the value is. And we reduced it to some digestible concepts which people could then understand on the basis of examples that we gave them. Because, you know, you want the ideas that you get to be ideas that are relevant to the context of the people that you're speaking to, but you also want them to be realistically executable. I mean, I've heard everything from I want a red button that when I hit it, I get everything I need to know about the customer exactly when I need to know about it. Now, that's a great idea, but you can't really do anything with it. So you want to enable people who have very valuable experience to help you articulate ideas that you can actually execute on. Now, this is a tremendously rewarding process, because what you see is that the minute you give people a tool that they can really think creatively and they can really help you. And another thing which is incredibly rewarding is that suddenly people who imagine that they don't have any relevance in this new world because they're not data scientists, data engineers, software engineers, suddenly understand that their domain knowledge is extremely valuable in this process. Their understanding of the clients is extremely valuable. Understanding of products is extremely valuable. And so you then get this really, really interesting and energizing symbiosis between, say, what you're trying to do and where the company is. And I found that particularly rewarding. Now, you're starting to get these ideas in, and then you want to prototype. And you want to prototype a lot. It can be small, it can be scrappy, it doesn't have to be perfect. But you really want to create a lot of tangible prototypes that you can demonstrate and demonstrate and demonstrate. And you know, we did things which were basically quite close to our core, but that we could realize quite quickly. For example, we predicted a credit rating using data sets that we would normally not use to do that. And our credit rating is something very close to a bank, but we do it in a specific way. Now, if you can do it in a different way, then you start to, you know, give a true understanding to people who know exactly what a credit rating is of how you can change that using data science. Forecasting cash balances, for example. Sentiment analysis on service call notes. You know, these are all things you can do pretty quickly. Again, not perfectly, but they really give a tangible idea of what the technology can do. And communicate about these. Every quarter we communicated a wow factor. So we used to build a prototype and then communicate it throughout the quarter. So you have this constant flow of communication about tangible, say, output from your team, which starts to really build momentum in the organization and a deeper understanding and appreciation for what the possibilities are. And now you've got quite a few prototypes, you've got quite a few ideas. And I think it's important at this stage to remember that you need to lead an advanced analytics initiative with a user-centered design process. Now, it doesn't really matter if you're building an end-to-end product which involves a dashboard or some kind of product that's actually going to sit in the hand of a user, or if you're developing an algorithm which goes deep into some software system. In both cases, eventually somebody is going to benefit from the insight, a person. And it's important to take that person into account, to intimately understand what that person's problem is. This is UX research. And to then try to understand the variety of solutions you can bring to solve that problem. Some may involve data science, some may not. And if you don't solve this user's problem, you're never going to solve the business problem. And so it's really important to remember that advanced analytics product development is actually an innovation process. At ING, we use what we call PACE, which is our way of innovating. And that's typically a combination of lean startup, design thinking, and agile principles, which goes through these 5 phases where, you discover, like I said, ideate, maybe prototype a little bit just to get a feeling for what you're talking about. You explore the market, the opportunity size. Then problem fit, where you actually really dig down on what is the problem we're solving. Solution fit, where you start to build a number of different solutions or articulate a number of the solutions for that specific problem. Market fit, where you start to roll those solutions out to a little more users. And then scaling, which is when you really productize from an engineering perspective and from a number of users' perspective. And I think throughout this cycle, what you're really trying to understand is desirability, how much someone wants your product, feasibility, can you build it, and viability, will it result in value? I think if you want one specific item maybe of interest, which is different when you're developing advanced analytics products in comparison to, say, using basic technologies, is that, of course, when you're developing advanced analytics products, there's a research element to the data science. So the risk around feasibility is a bit higher. We can anticipate much better whether something is feasible using, say, standard web technologies. When you're doing data science, well, most times you don't really know. So you want to basically prototype a little bit earlier in the process with a slightly higher fidelity than what you normally would with standard, say, technology products. Now, it's at this point that selection becomes really important. So if one thing I've really learned is that there are always more ideas than you can execute. So when I first started our process, I thought, let's go hunting for ideas. We really need good ideas. And I did that. And then I got a huge amount of ideas back. And you can't execute all the ideas. You have to choose the best ones, the ones that will be most successful, the ones that will have highest impact. Your selection criteria become really important. So you're in advanced analytics capability. Do you do BI stuff? A lot of the demand from your organization will be business intelligence. People just want to know stuff. Do you do automation? So scope. What is advanced analytics? 2, do these ideas align strategically where the ambition level of the organization is? You're going to have to run quite a long track to get this done. You really want to align with what the strategic priorities are of the organization. Otherwise, halfway through, you might be deprioritized. You want to prioritize those initiatives which have the highest level of impact for your organization. Now, impact can be dollars, but it can also be people's happiness. But it's important to articulate what that impact is. Maybe one point there to mention would be when you're dealing with an innovation process, there's no such thing as a business case because you just don't know. But you can calculate an opportunity size and then make some assumptions of, how much of that opportunity size you can realistically address. Do you have enough data to start? Can you get enough data to start? Can you use the data that you get legally, ethically? And one last one, I think, for me would be, does that project help you scale the advanced analytics capability? Does it add a new dimension, something which you haven't done before, around which you can develop people? Now, as you go through this innovation process, I think it's really important to let the squads develop themselves behind a purpose. You're hiring really great people. And the product teams or the squads are where the magic happens. This is the engine. So let them tell you what people they need. Let them find the people that they want. Let them tell you the technologies they want to work with. I mean, today data scientists, data engineers, software engineers are working with open source. They don't want to work with the boring, slow, less performing enterprise tooling available. And you want to let them think, because what they come up with will then be the architecture that you can build on later. You want to let them discover how they want to work. Give them a purpose and let them organize themselves. Now, as you progress through the funnel, you'll move probably from needing analytical translation, some UX research, maybe some data science prototyping, to progressively more and more engineering content in your team. Software engineering, data engineering, because you're automating more structural feeds. And that's when the analytical translation work of, say, your lead on the project turns into more product management work. It's more delivery, stakeholder management, bringing things together as opposed to articulating the specific data science insights. And it's important that, you know, that person in particular evolves with the project. But I think if you place the right trust in these product teams and you give them the right context, they will tell you what needs to happen. So let that process run. It's here where partners can really help you accelerate. So you now got 1 or 2 product squads that are running after your first project purposes. And it's at this point where you really want to make it an enterprise, say, scaled capability that partners can really help. So, for instance, we worked together with GoData Driven to get people that worked as integral parts of our product teams. So you can partner for people, but you can also partner for product to accelerate your product development. So to give an example, you can partner with a scale-up or a startup or another company that has a half fabricate or a data set that you need. And that can accelerate your product development immensely. We've worked quite successfully with a number of partners. What we discovered is the partners that are most applicable to us are, say, scale-ups that are just post-Series A. That means that they've got some kind of half-fabricate product, but they're really looking for a scalable use case, a client network, maybe some funding. And they're really happy to adjust their roadmap in terms of their product with what you think also has value to you and your organizational needs or the organizational needs of your clients. And so we've partnered with a number of different companies of this in this category, and that's been really productive because it takes away the whole takes away a lot of heavy lifting because they have something you can use. Now, as you start to grow and you start to have a number of different product teams, you will need to organize quite a substantial number of things around those teams. You're going to have to organize servers. You're going to have to organize data. You're going to have to organize a data analytics platform, the tooling around that data that they can use. You might have to organize recruitment so that you can actually scale the teams. You need legal and compliance, which deal with whether or not you can use the data and how ethical it is. You're going to need quality assurance to do your model risk management, to understand fairness. You're going to need to build a community so people feel part of something within the organization and can interact and grow together. And you're going to enable these teams with partnerships, like I said, the procurement process, the sourcing process. Now, you need to consider how you organize this around your squads. Do you borrow this from the organization? Do you internalize it because the organization cannot supply it to you? That'll be very context dependent. You also need to answer questions like, where in the world should this be? Can we split up teams by country? How do we do that? Now, my experience is that you can split up a squad. It's not optimal. But you really want the product manager and the UX person to be as close as possible to the user and the client. And you want the engineers and the data science to really sit together. And that's as far as I would go. governance becomes really important. Now, governance is a little bit of, I would say, the word implies constraint for many of us, but good governance actually really helps you. It's at this time where you start to get a bit more body and size in your capability, and that's when you start to see that you have a number of different touch points in the organization. In our case, that's IT, that's some business domains, that's the advanced analytics function at a group level. It's innovation because you're running innovation processes. And it's important to create some kind of governance which involves all these different stakeholders. Because an effective relationship and process with these different stakeholders will mean that you continuously get funded. It'll mean they can help you with impediments to your progress. They provide a platform to communicate what you're doing to the organization. And that's when it starts to become very structurally embedded within the enterprise. Now, in our case, we have an innovation board which comprises representatives from different touch points that we have in the organization. And I think depending on your context, you have to define what those touch points are. But by definition, I would say that a leader from any part of the organization who provides you with something that you integrate into your capability should be part of your governance model, and you should make the effort to make sure that that person is aware and supportive and understands what you're doing. Culture, really key to continuous improvement. You can do a lot and say a lot about culture, but it's really important in order to bind the capability that's becoming of a substantial size around some kind of central culture. I mean, when you're up to around 30 people, you see that there's really intimate interaction between people, and you don't really need to focus on what type of culture you want to develop. Basically, it happens automatically. There's a team vibe. You're all probably in one country. When you start to get above 30 people, what you see is that culture becomes really important. There's more distance between the people. You start to work on different things in a different way. There are more views. You're starting to get more heterogeneity in the types of people you're recruiting. So focus on culture becomes more important. And it's important to centralize that focus around a couple of themes. So for instance, for us, experimentation is really important. We notice that people that come to work for us, they just want to do cool stuff with cool technology. And so enabling them to experiment is really important. So we have 2 days a month, one day where we have teams that spontaneously form and vote on how they want to experiment. And they do a full day experiment. And often we use those experiments in our products. We have another day which is called study day, where people can continue the experiment, but they also can, for instance, just use to learn something new. And that's really important to our people and to us. We've developed a set of shared values, how we want to do good with data, and a variety of other things that we all subscribe to. We try to make our people thought leaders. What you see is that if you try to make your people thought leaders, and that's in turn good for the work that they do, it's good to attract people from outside, it really influences the culture positively because people have something which they are really good at and really proud of. And lastly, I think it's really important to, once you have a certain scale and you have developed certain merits that exceed the level of where the rest of the organization is, it's important to share those merits with the organization, because it's at that point that you can really influence enterprise change to a data-driven organization. So once you've collected data, make that available, even if it isn't to data scientists, but just to analysts who want that data. If you've developed a really cool community around this topic, invite other areas of the organization to participate, to present, and share anything else of the capability that can help the organization move forward towards a data-driven organization. Because I think that's when you really have advanced analytics impact everywhere. So I think the key message is, define what your context is and what the key characteristics of that context are. and define how you can use within that context advanced analytics to really move where you placed forward and have real impact. I think that if you scale your advanced analytics capability correctly and you right size it and give it the right content and character for your context, you can really solve amazing problems. And I think that's what we're all here to do, right? So thanks a lot. We've got time for questions.
And Doron, when you start building up your advanced analytics practice, you've just shared 13 lessons and insights. If you just start, with which of these lessons should you start? Should you start with all of them at the same time, or are there a few that you say, well, prioritize those first?
No, I would say prioritize getting leadership on board, prioritize linking it in some way to your strategy, get your core team together, start to explain to the organization what you're going to do, and then prototype and communicate. I think if if you have absolutely nothing, I think those are the 5 things you want to kick off with.
Thanks. Are there any questions from the audience? It always starts in the back of the room somehow. For next round question, asker should sit in the front, just for my sake.
Yeah, so we know that many companies are struggling with the foundations of data, like data governance, data quality process establishment, and my question is about the timing of advanced analytics. When is a good time to start with it if the foundations of data are not there yet?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think, so there's 2 parts to answer. I personally don't believe that you should wait for your data to be organized and then start with advanced analytics, because your data will, by definition, will never be organized. There's always more. We're creating more and more and more, and so that process will be continuous. I also don't believe that, I think what you see is that you only discover what data you really need once you start working with it. So you really want to, I think, start with the value proposition and then work back from that, as opposed to starting with the data and then working towards the value proposition. And that means that actually you don't need a lot of data to start. So start with what you have and then organize the data you need in the slipstream of that, not vice versa.
Any other questions?
Great talk, thank you. Once you're successful as a team, you start deploying more and more products into production, so the whole industrialization part of it. The typical people in your team are more the people who are willing to experiment and build new stuff. How do you organize your operations and your maintenance of the solutions coming from the advanced analytics teams?
So at the moment, we believe that a squad should progress through the whole life cycle of a product. And what you see is that there's no hard break between one phase and another, because we don't think there should be a handover. But what you will see, of course, is that people in the team change. And, that's more of an evolutionary process. So it's not really we build a product and then hand it over to IT to implement. No, we build a product, bring it to production, maintain it, and along that continuum, we might change the types of people that are involved in the product.
Or 2 more questions here. If you had a question as well, right? Oh, you had. Okay, then you're fine.
Yeah, nice presentation. I have a question in relation to customer lifetime value. Are you guys developing models around that? That's one. And the second question is how you balance between SaaS solutions producing advanced analytics and your team producing, different use cases for advanced analytics.
Okay, so on the first question, no, we're not producing any lifetime value models in our domain, mainly because that type of exercise is less relevant to a client base which is a few thousand clients, which typically remains with you forever. So if you look at our type of clients, we have, for instance, clients like Philips, which basically have maybe 50 banks around them. Philips does not often leave a major bank. It might allocate business differently over time. But so in that sense, there's no real relevance to customer lifetime like it would be in the B2C segment, where customers do churn more often. Those types of cases, I think, are more addressable in our retail division, and there we do have analytics departments dealing with those type of more marketing, customer interaction related exercises. Then to your second question about externally developed analytics and say vendors supplying that and how we balance that. I'm not entirely sure of the specific question, but I'll just give you some perspective, and then you can follow up with a more specific question if I haven't addressed your the area you want to touch on. So typically, we've always said that what we want to do is develop a capability for the bank, and we don't want to outsource that capability to a vendor. Now, we've also said that we want to create exponential value. And, typically if you take a big vendor and you outsource the process, that's costing quite a lot of money. And that's eating into the exponential value that you can create if you do it successfully yourself. And because of those two things, we've been more reluctant to, say, employ big vendors. And we prefer to work on the people side and on, as I explained, how we work with, say, smaller partners in order to develop our capability and, try to create exponential value as opposed to incremental value by outsourcing our product development to a bigger vendor. If I understand what you mean by is that what is that? Yeah, does that sufficiently address your?
I mean, you have big vendors, for example, like Salesforce or Adobe or Microsoft, that continuously they are creating advanced analytics.
Sure.
And so they already have models, like Google have models for customer lifetime value, but they are in some ways very constrained. So yeah, however, like sort of in terms of investment, it's better to use what is there already, and then you like sort of create more on top of that rather than reinventing the wheel for something. So, but yeah.
Totally. Look, I think there's I'm making it quite black and white. I mean, but there's a huge spectrum of reuse in this area. From open source algorithms that exist on GitHub, right through to say algorithms that are being made available by the bigger vendors. Typically, I look at that as more sourcing, basically. Capability that you can reuse, and if that helps achieve your goal within a reasonable time frame at a reasonable cost in the context of the impact you can potentially have, then it's logical. And so we don't have one size fits all approach. We do this, we don't do that. We're willing to explore everything. What I've seen is that what actually gets traction is either going to, say, really highly specialized providers of people who actually put people in your teams so that you can develop your capability, and on the one hand, and the other hand is working more intimately with smaller partners who are more flexible on their roadmap, which have teams which are quite similar to the product teams you have, so they can work together well. I've had less success with, say, big outsourcing activities to very big analytics providers to date. I'm not, they might become relevant in the future. And we will, of course, at any single moment in the product development process, look for ways to increase the efficiency of that product development process by relying, like you say, on different things that are out there.
And in every phase that you are, that changes, right? The kind of companies that you work with and partnerships that you have.
Definitely, yeah.
Doron, thank you very much for your talk here this morning.
Thanks.
We have something for you to celebrate the weekend with later on. And we're up for a quick break, 10-minute break, and then we'll dive into AI for healthcare. So I look forward to seeing you back here in 10 minutes.